So I just wanted to say welcome to our event today. This is obviously discussing the historic rail interchange here in Alexandria. And we have our presenter here with us, Dick Chait. And so he will take questions at the end. And we hope you enjoy.
Okay, Trish, thank you very much. And my thanks to you and your staff for setting up the program and arranging the room. I appreciate it. My thanks also go to my family who allowed me the time to prepare for the talk. Without all those contributions, I guess I wouldn't be here. But it really is a pleasure to be here and talk about Alexandria's historic rail interlocking. Really, it's the AF Interlocking, it's called. And I've had an interest, a couple personal comments before we get into that. I've had an interest in railroads since day one, really, when I used to enjoy playing with the Lionel electric trains. And that goes back quite a few years. And I've always been a rail fan. And since moving here to Alexandria in the 1980s, I took an interest in Alexandria as a rail hub and was really drawn to the Potomac Yards, the Union Station, Alexandria's Union Station, and also to today's topic, which is the AF Interlocking, which basically is a traffic cop for all the rail traffic coming out of used to be Potomac Yards, but now CSX, but also the Union Station. So passengers, trains coming out of Union Station, freight trains coming since up until 89 or so, coming out of Potomac Yards. They had to go through the interlocking, and I'll explain what that is in a minute, at the AF Interlocking location, AF standing for Alexandria, Fredericksburg. So I think with that introduction, let me go to the first image and explain to you exactly what the AF Interlocking today looks like. And if you travel up Duke Street, west on Duke Street, to Telegraph Road and go south on Telegraph Road, you immediately, if you look to your right, you will see, but you have to be careful of the traffic, you will see a bunch of railroad tracks and a bunch of interlocking switches. This is what you'll see right here. And this is what I'm talking about. This is called the AF Interlocking, which controls the traffic coming out of Union Station or on the freight traffic on CSX Railroad. They can move from one track to another depending on where their location is. So next time you're on Telegraph Road, just coming off of Duke Street, take a look. That's basically what it looks like today. Didn't always look like this, and kind of get an appreciation for what it was and how it developed. We're going to take a look, turn back the clock and take a look at some historical things that led up to this, because it follows quite naturally. If you look at the next image, this is the going back to the mid 1800s. Alexandria was a big rail hub for the Orange and Alexandria Railroad. Civil War, the traffic, this railroad belonged to the Union. And so they were shuttling trains back and forth. There's a roundhouse there. This, of course, is not here anymore. That roundhouse is not there But you can go back in off of Duke Street, Holland Lane, I think it is, and you will come across, maybe off of Jameson, I'm not quite sure. You will come across Roundhouse Lane. That's exactly where the roundhouse was. So let's go, let's go on to the next one. This is kind of an image taken from the roundhouse, and you can see kind of busy as it heads south away from the roundhouse towards the Piedmont region. And I think these images, I have to credit the Trish Walker and her staff here for these images that are part of the local history collection here. So let's go on to the next one. Okay, this doesn't look like much, but it tells a whole lot of story. If we can, the orange in Alexandria, and we'll just highlight that, coming out of Alexandria down towards Culpeper and towards Gordonsville and Charlottesville and on to Lynchburg, basically taking rail traffic from Alexandria and moving it onto this orange in Alexandria, which was the railroad that would go into the Piedmont region, as opposed to the next on the bottom, the next one, Trish, says Richmond and Fredericksburg. Basically, that's the Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac line, which essentially followed the coastline. So you've got geographically, you've got a line that goes into the Piedmont region, which was at that time the Orange and Alexandria, and another line that didn't quite reach Alexandria yet, and I'll comment to that in a minute, called the Richmond and Fredericksburg and Potomac. This line was originally charted in the 1830s, I believe, just as the Orange and Alexandria line was charted in that period of time. But it did not reach Alexandria until sometime later, primarily because it was heavily damaged during the war. And there was, after the war, there was kind of fits and starts for this line to move north towards Alexandria. And then I think the Pennsylvania Railroad, which we'll talk about in a minute, along with the Atlantic coastline, had an interest in moving freight out of Alexandria down towards Richmond, linking basically the north with the south. So by 1890, or by the 1890s, I should say, the RF&P, Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac line reached Alexandria and on into Washington. And that set up a whole different ballgame, but basically for moving freight, moving passenger trains, which we'll get into in a minute. Next. This is the slogan or the icon for RF&P. You see it was chartered in 1834. As I think it's probably one of the oldest railroads in Virginia. It was one of the oldest. And as I said, its slogan was linking north and south. Next. Pennsylvania Railroad, its slogan was Standard Railroad of the North. Had a route mileage about 11,000 miles, total track miles into the, I think, around 25,000. It was a monster railroad connecting Washington, going west to Chicago, then southwest to St. Louis, Cincinnati. It was a big railroad. Next. Another railroad that had interest in the Richmond, Fredericksburg and Potomac line was the Atlantic Coast Line. And its slogan was Standard Railroad of the South. So you got the North, you got the South, and you got RF&P in between. So let's take a look at a map that basically shows this a little bit more clearly. This is a rail map of the that I took from the timetable, Pennsylvania Railroad timetable, and I'll pass this around. But it shows Pennsylvania Railroad coming down from New York through Delaware, through Baltimore, and stopping at Washington. But at Washington, actually Alexandria, just south of Washington, as you all know, there was the RF&P on the to the right there is Trish Walker showing, making the connection with the RF&P, taking the traffic down to Richmond and southward. And notice that the line that says SOU, it's really the Southern Railroad. Trish, if you could outline that right there. And that's the line that was the old Orange and Alexandria line through the Piedmont region. Southern Railway took the O&A over in about the late 1890s. So you've got, again, Piedmont region, you got the coastal region, okay? And today that Piedmont region basically is under the auspices of Norfolk Southern, who took over the Southern Railway when they had some financial difficulties. RF&P today belongs to the CSX Corporation, but strangely enough, the subdivision that this line here coming out of Alexandria is on is called the RF&P subdivision. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, next. This is now the map for the Atlantic coastline, and it shows, I think, just as clearly the line coming out of Alexandria, the RF&P, and at Richmond, the Atlantic coastline took over and went southward from there. So the RF&P, just to review, a little over 100 miles long, but critically important in linking the railroads of the north to the railroads of the south. Okay, so now, because we had that linkage, there was a tremendous increase in freight traffic and also passenger traffic. But let's talk about the freight traffic. Now we're talking with RF&P completed. We're talking probably the late 1890s, early 1900, and next. And what's the next thing to come up? Potomac Yards. This is what it looked like way back when. You can take a look at it and you can see all the freight there. This was one of the biggest yards. Thank you. This is one of the biggest yards on the East Coast. But if you go by there today, you won't see it, but it lasted until I think the late 1980s, when railroads kind of had a tough time, and Conrail, government-sponsored corporation took over because railroads were basically bankrupt. But anyway, getting back to the Potomac Yards, next, I think there's a couple of RF&P engines that really did all the work in the yard. It belonged to RF&P. They did the work. Traffic coming down from on the Pennsylvania Railroad, the Baltimore in Ohio, the Chesapeake in Ohio, all came through the Potomac Yards. Next. Here's an RF&P diesel freight coming out, heading south. One thing I'd like to bring up here is that all railroads had a certain color to their engines. Pennsylvania Railroad was red. RF&P, they were the blue and gray. Basically, blue for the north, gray for the south. And it may not be very apparent here, but if we could see it in person, that's what you would see. Very, very informative, very important that coloring be used. Okay, next. All right, this I just want to comment again on Potomac Yards. There are a lot of acreage. Let me just check my notes, but I think we're talking probably about 450 acres here, employing about 1,500 people. And as far as the length of the yard, from top to bottom, about 2.5 miles. You won't see this today, as I said. What you'll see are townhouses. There's a mall, shopping mall, a park, and towards the northern end of it, what used to be the yard, the Potomac Yards, is the Virginia Tech's Innovation Center. Completely different. And as you go down Potomac Avenue, you kind of get a kind of a strange feeling that this was once biggest yard on the East Coast. Okay, that's the story for the freight. Now the passenger, this about the same time, RF&P built this station, the Alexandria Union Station. Here's an image during its construction. So just to review, we got the Potomac Yard handling the freight, Union Station, the passenger trains. Next, Trish. This was taken from a postcard from the Alexandria Library, the local history collection. If you look at it today, it's looks just as beautiful, and their architecture is the same. But again, you look at it, and it's very, very meaningful. Next, there's a train that's coming through here. And again, if you can picture in the blue and gray, stopping at Alexandria Union Station, heading south. Next. Okay, when I say heading south, it's going directly to the AF Interlocking, because that's what controlled the freight trains, what controlled the passenger trains as they came out of Potomac Yards and Union Station, respectively, because it also had to handle the traffic coming north. To the left, you'll see a line that comes off. Go right up. Yeah, right there is the Southern Railway, which branched off the RF&P and took the trains to the Piedmont region, down towards Lynchburg. And I'll have more to say about that because today there are the Norfolk Southern, which was the Southern Railway, has two lines coming off the CSX RF&P subdivision. Next. This is the way it looked. The AF Tower. That's what controlled the switching back in the early 1900s. It was all mechanical. And the person in charge would be able to move the switches back and forth by lever, using a mechanical lever, which I think is on the next view graph or chart. Okay, well, we're not quite there yet, but there's a train coming through again in the traditional RF&P colors, passing the AF Tower. Next. There's a freight coming through, passing the tower. You don't see the tower, but the tower is on the left, heading south. And you've got 1, 2, 3, looks like 4 or 5 engines. In the background is, I think, the overpass, the Telegraph Road overpass, right there. Okay. When I said it was mechanical, how they move the switches back and forth, I mean, basically this was all done by mechanical linking. And if they wanted to move the switches, these levers would be pulled up and back on instruction from the dispatcher, moving the trains from one track to another. Go ahead. Here's not exactly in the AF tower, but here's a gentleman basically moving the switches around, but being able to see what he's doing on an electric board, because when he moves the switches, he can see what the results are of his actions. Next, you'll see. So he can see exactly what's happening once he moves these back and forth and moves the trains around and changes their direction from one track to another. Okay. Next. If you look, if you go down Telegraph Road and look over to your right, you will see there will not be a tower there. The tower is gone today. Everything is electronic. Everything is computer controlled. There is this control box here receiving signals from the dispatcher, in this case from Baltimore, because we're on the Baltimore division of the CSX line. And it's the only thing you'll see is the AF, which is the nomenclature for for this control box. The computer here is receiving data from either satellite or cell towers, high-speed transmission. No mechanical linkage involved, as we saw before. It's all done electronically with this high-speed computer transmission. Okay, next. So again, here's what you see. The AF control box is right in the middle and right there. That's that control box, and that moves all these switches around. Trains going south, trains coming south, trains coming north. And we'll take a look at some of this traffic. And I go down there and I try to watch as best I can, because you have to be very careful when you try to view the rail traffic. You just get so close, you can't get very, very close because of the risk of injury. Next. All right. I showed you what was to the right, actually to the west on Telegraph Road. This is looking east. If you're coming north on Telegraph Road just before Duke Street and you look over, you'll be able to see this. This is also part of the AF interchange. Next. Actually, a lot of this information, and I was very fortunate to get this booklet, made friends with a track foreman. He said he gave me this outdated Baltimore Division timetable, which basically is mapping all the subdivisions in the Baltimore Division. CSX is a huge corporation now that runs all took over from Conrail and split basically the responsibility with Norfolk Southern, depending on the location. But on the East Coast, it's all CSX primarily. In Pennsylvania, it's Norfolk Southern. They basically took over from the railroads that we knew back in the 1950s, 60s, and right up through the late 1900s. Next. I apologize for the markings. These are my markings, actually. This is what you see on page 124. This is the AF. If Tricia, if you can note that, the AF on the left side there, top left, right there. This is the AF control box, and actually governing all those switches that you see on the right-hand side between those two dark lines. I'll describe in a minute what I've colored in there, but basically that is where the Norfolk Southern comes off the CSX line right there. And if you're going to New Orleans on Amtrak's Southern, it used to be called the Southern Crescent, just a crescent, the train will come out of Union Station, go on the CSX line to the AF Interlocking, and move on to Norfolk Southern line. You see Norfolk Southern right at the bottom of that image, right? You see it right there. We'll talk more about this, and I'll try to make it a little bit more clear as we move on to the next image. If you look at the tracks, and I probably did something I shouldn't have done here, but I did get a picture here of this interlocking. It's hard to see these rails as if you look at it from a side view, but they are interlocking, and this is the CSX line, and that's why the basic map that I showed you before, just before this, is important, because it shows you a little bit more clearly where these tracks interlock. So here's a CSX freight train. There's the Telegraph Road overpass in the background, and we'll track it coming through here. Next, it's got 1, 2, looks like 3 engines, each 4,400 horsepower. This primarily, basically, is the reason that put Potomac Yard out of business. They didn't need to do any switching there. They could go directly from let's say Baltimore, through Alexandria, carrying the freight with this kind of horsepower, and they didn't need to do any switching at all. RFP was basically gone, and this kind of power will take the train all the way to its destination. So if you get a chance to see these as they come through the Alexandria Union Station, this is what you'll see. This is the same train. It looks like a coal train, what they call a unit train, all coal, probably from Pennsylvania someplace down to the coal-fired power station somewhere in Southern Virginia. Okay, next. Amtrak trains also use these tracks. There's an Amtrak coming north through the AF Interlocking. So sometimes I've seen freight trains held up to allow an Amtrak train come through. Next. So as they come on into Union Station, north of the interlocking, this is again what you'll see. That I believe is Duke Street, the Duke Street overpass, coming into Union Station. Okay, next, Trish. Now let's come back to what I told you before. There is a link to the Norfolk Southern line, which is, again, just off you can see the Telegraph Road overpass in the background, off the CSX line onto what will be the Norfolk Southern line. And we'll see the Amtrak's crescent here coming off of this line in just a second. Go ahead, Trish, please. Here it comes. You can see to the right is the CSX main line. And so this train right here has come off the CSX line, the old RF&P subdivision, and onto a track that will go south in through the Piedmont region, through Lynchburg, Charlottesville, Atlanta, not the coastline that the CSX line goes down, but this is headed inland through the Piedmont region. Next. Okay, so it just has passed me. Next. Okay, so moving now onto the Norfolk Southern line. There's a CSX freight in the background that I caught. Next. Okay, and this is you'll see this, this is called the seminary control box. This is the computer controlled electronic setup that the dispatcher will move the train from the CSX line over to the Norfolk Southern line. And not very sexy at all. I mean, but there's a lot of electronics in there, and you can see the connection to the satellite transmission of data. Okay, next. Here it is again. So that train has come off the CSX line, and if that arrow goes south on that arrow, Trish, go down from the arrow. Yeah, go down. Came off the CSX line and down onto the Norfolk Southern line. It's called the Horn Track, and called the horn track because it was basically, it moved traffic around. Passenger trains didn't have to go to across the CSX line that you see on the right side of this image. Go to the right side, right there. That belongs to Norfolk Southern. So Norfolk Southern has two places where it comes off the CSX line. Right in there is, if you go down Van Dorn Street, actually Eisenhower Avenue, and then turn right on Van Dorn Street, Norfolk Southern has a freight yard there, which is basically all tank cars. It's called the Thoroughbred Bulk Transmission, Thoroughbred Bulk Transfer Line, and they're all tank cars, and I believe they all contain ethanol. And you'll see tank trucks come in there, fill up with the ethanol, move out, and go to the station where they mix the ethanol with the gasoline. So Norfolk Southern had two locations where they come off the CSX line. Okay, next. So if you look at the trains coming through now, you can see how busy the AF Interlocking is. You've got, and this is what I saw at the Union Station. You got an Amtrak Northeast Regional. You got a VRE headed down towards Spotsylvania on the CSX line. You've got another VRE train, number 325, going through Manassas on the Norfolk Southern line. There's another Amtrak Regional, number 95. More VREs, another Amtrak, another VRE, another Amtrak. So Union Station is busy, and so is the AF Interlocking. Next, here's a VRE train coming in. In the background, just to the right, is the metro line. So this King Street is a very, very busy transportation center right now, as you probably know. Next, Trish. Here it is. I think just on its way out of Union Station, heading south. There's the Duke Street overpass. And something very interesting on the next image you'll see. It's kind of a push-pull operation. They can operate the train from both directions. When it reaches its destination, gets ready for the morning trip northward, and the engineer is located on this end of the train. But all the power comes from that engine that I showed a couple of images back. So Union Station is busy. The AF Interlocking is busy. Next, and I think Alexandria was a rail hub, is a rail hub, and will maintain the rail hub into the future, showing a true gateway to the south. That's about it. Covered a lot of information, I know. Any questions at this time? Yes, sir.
So what's the Potomac Yard has been around since the late 19th century, right? Or the early 20th century, early 20th century.
Yeah, in about 1901, somewhere in there, I think.
What's the safety record?
What was the safety record?
What was the safety record?
That's a good question.
The crashes?
I haven't read. I mean, all I know, it was busy. I mean, it's something we could look up, but I think they had an excellent safety record. I mean, they could not afford to be careless. Let's put it that way. I mean, you had, and the reason for that, I'm saying that is the RF&P was basically, there were railroads that was a consortium of railroads that owned the RF&P. They did not really own it themselves. There was the Pennsylvania, the CNO, the Atlantic Coastline, Seaboard also had a vested interest. Chesapeake and Ohio, Baltimore, Ohio. So I think with that overwatch, I don't know of any major incidents there. It wasn't. I don't know. I will research it, but in my opinion, with that, all those large railroads, including the Atlantic Coastline, involved, I don't think they would tolerate. But that's a good question. Do you know of any? Were you told of anything?
No, I don't recall it. So that's why I was curious. I mean, if you go back to the 19th century, of course, rail lines, there was a lot of issues around safety. Non-employees always getting killed in accidents, sometimes you have these horrific passenger crashes in the late 19th century more. And I just wondered, this was more, as you said, consortium.
I think
I never heard of any issues here, but I just.
Well, I think, 1,500 people being employed there. I mean, there had to be some mishaps, but I mean, today you've got these. I showed those engines with 4,400 horsepower each, and they got a new strategy now. They take one of those engines and they put them in the middle of the train, so you can easily, if you watch, these freight trains come through on the CSX line through Union Station. These freight trains could exceed 100 cars. Now, if you figure the probability of something happening with a long freight train like that, what they call a hot box, the bearings. And I think this is what happened out in Pennsylvania or somewhere in the Midwest. I forgot where it was. Something's going to happen. But the freight trains during the RF and Potomac Yard days were not that long. So I would say my guess would be very good safety record.
Okay. I have a question, not specifically about the mechanics of the but the fact that it acted, and Alexandria in general acted as sort of, the fact that this area in general was sort of stuck between the South and the North during the war. I would imagine that such a critical linkage of rail lines was extremely hotly contested during the war. Do you know, if there was additional interest in capturing or controlling this area by either the North or the South?
From what I've read, most of the conflict occurred in Virginia. The Orange and Alexandria was chartered in the 1830s. By the time 1860 rolled around, it was in the hands of the Union side of that conflict. So that's the way they moved. That's the way they moved men, equipment on the O&A line towards wherever they needed it. You can see remnants of the O&A, and going back to your point about being of importance, the Wilk Street Tunnel, that was O&A. picking up traffic from the shore, from the harbor, bringing it to around the roundhouse area, doing some moving around and then on their way. There's also one other remnant, again off of Duke Street. If you go back in Holland Lane, just by that restaurant, there's a restaurant there, and you turn left or right, depending on which way you're coming. There's something called, there's a stone arch bridge called Hoofs, H-O-O-F''S, Hoofs Run Bridge, still there. That carried the O&A over the Hoofs Run and on to its destination towards, the cities that I mentioned. So, I mean, were there other railroads that were involved in Georgia and so on and so forth? Sure. But as far as Alexandria is concerned, this was it. And I think, as I said, Alexandria maintains its image as a gateway to the South.
And I'll just chime in and say that with the city being occupied during the war, if it was within the bounds of the city, it's the Union, but south of here, hotly contested.
Makes sense.
And we have plenty of resources, so.
Okay, well, thank you for attending. Thank you, Tricia, again for setting it up. I think this will be on YouTube. So if there are any questions, offline, I'll give you how you can get a hold of me. We can talk some more. Thank you.
Okay, thank everybody for attending, and we're going to end the recording now.